Mosaic. How you doing? I haven't seen you from this angle for quite some time. I'm glad to be with you. So awesome. I don't know, funny thing, when I see that background and stuff, instead of the music that we have, I expect Gloria Estefan or something like that, or Miami Sound Machine. Reminds me of Miami Vice, so here in Colorado. So you're thinking, what is this going to be like today if you started with that? So, all right. So we are continuing a series in Luke, and I'm excited to continue with this. When I first was checking out this passage, I'm like, oh man, what's in there that can be drawn out? But man, as you get into this, it's pretty cool. So if you have a Bible, turn to Luke chapter 10. We're still there. Or it will be on the screen. Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So this is kind of like a complete little story here, like a 3-act play, really condensed. There's an introduction of characters, they encounter a problem, and then the hero resolves the problem. A nice little vignette-like episode in the life of Jesus that teaches us something. And this story, honestly, seems to kind of stand in an isolated context only to itself. What I mean is that what happened right before this, the story of the Good Samaritan, what happens next, it happens at a different time somewhere else. And so it's like, what does it have to do with that? But Luke, when he was writing his gospel, he wasn't necessarily interested in the chronology of things, that this happened first, then this happened next, and on and so forth. However, it's placed in a series of episodes that Luke put together to present the person of Jesus. This is Jesus here. And so it's like this one time this happened. Oh, and speaking of that, this other time this happened. And so there is context because it goes with what it's around. So there's a reason why this story sits next to a story like the Good Samaritan. It really does. Now, Kirk, if you were here last week, Kirk did an amazing job talking about the Good Samaritan, didn't he? Really great. And so we'll golf clap that one. Yeah, there you go. If you missed that, want to hear it again, it's on our website. You can go there. But going back to that for just a minute, I'd like to bring out something else. I joked with Kirk, it's like, I'm going to totally fix your sermon, stuff. But no need for that. I want to bring out something else that will offer context and slide right into what we're talking about today with Mary and Martha. Have you ever heard the expression, you can't see the forest for the trees? It means that we can get so fixated on an individual tree, right, that we forget we're standing in the middle of a forest. Let's read the story of the Good Samaritan, just a little snippet, actually, not the whole thing. We're going to just start in verse 30, just to kind of refresh it for us. So basically, this teacher of the law was like, what's the greatest commandment? And love God, love your neighbor, that kind of stuff. And then they're like, so who's your neighbor, Who is my neighbor? In reply, verse 30, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him." And actually, we're just going to stop there. That's enough to kind of bring out the point that Jesus was making here, okay? As Jesus told this story, as he went through this part, the part that we're like, oh my goodness, how could they have passed by on the other side? That's so terrible of them, how mean, As Jesus was sharing this story with them, I'm quite confident that these leaders, religious leaders, would have agreed, nodded in agreement. Right on, of course, yes. Of course they passed by on the other side. Excuse me. Of course they passed by on the other side. It's not because they were mean people, you know. It's not because they were busy, dreadfully busy. Remember that? If some of you are like, what just happened? You know, just Google VeggieTales busy song, right? It's not because they were just busy, you know. It's not because they were mean. They passed by on the other side because it would have defiled them for their religious duty, for their priestly service. That was their righteousness, obeying the law, keeping themselves pure and ceremonially clean. So to touch this half-dead guy, they might have wanted to help him, right? But that would have defiled them. But at the end, Jesus asked the question, so who was the neighbor to the man? And of course, they had to admit that it was the one who had mercy on him. Jesus' point was that the Samaritan fulfilled the law better than the priest and the Levite who were simply following the rules. They were looking at the trees. Samaritan saw the forest. Excuse me. They knew this was true because these people were teachers of the law, right? They understood Jesus' point exactly, you know? They just weren't living by it. They were so fixated on a single tree, they forgot about the forest, and it can happen to us too. We can become so focused on individual rights and wrongs that we forget that Jesus brings life in all of its fullness here. It's like the time when Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath. We're not going to turn there, but in Mark 3, Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath day. And the law said that you can't do any work on the Sabbath day. Excuse me. So these religious leaders that were there, they're like, healing somebody, that was cool, but sounds a lot like work to me. And so you violated the Sabbath. They were so focused on you violated the Sabbath. And in Mark chapter 3, verse 4, Jesus asked them, is it lawful on the Sabbath? Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill it? Jesus is introducing a dynamic to these Jews that they've not encountered yet. Yes, he broke the law. He violated the Sabbath, but he did something greater. It's about fulfilling the essence of the law. The whole law was more important than one individual command. He told them the Sabbath, I have been fine all morning. I get in front of you. So but he said the Sabbath day, that rule was made for people. People weren't made for that rule. People are the point of the rules. The law didn't exist to enforce individual commandments. The commandments are supposed to teach them what the law was all about, and as a result, what God's heart is. To bring life, not death. To bring healing, not harm. You can be right and still miss something big. You can be right and still have opportunity to choose a better way. Now, with this in mind, let's go back to Mary and Martha. What's the issue here? Martha was working, Mary wasn't helping. Now, some have said that not only was Mary not helping, but she was breaking customs and traditions that said women didn't have a place at the feet of a rabbi. But while that can make for some really good sounding preaching, it's just not true. Okay? It's not true. I believe Jesus validated women, but you're not going to find a case for it in this passage. Turns out, actually, something better, that God was already okay with women in that role. He had been for quite some time. It had been just fine for a woman to learn as a disciple for a long time in Israel. So around the age of 15, young boys who showed interest and promise, they would attend, what is this? Is this water? Hot, that's so much better than water. Thank you so much. Give it up for Bill. Let's give it up for Bill. Yep. This is a much better sermon now. But at the age of 15, young boys who showed interest and promise, they would attend religious school they would latch onto a rabbi as a disciple. They would be what they would refer to it as taking that rabbi's yoke upon them. You remember that? Some of you remember that from Scripture. Just like an ox being yoked to a plow, the student was yoked to figuratively to the rabbi's teaching about Torah. And so this was referred to also as sitting at the feet of a rabbi. You know, they would see this young boy, oh yeah, he sits at the feet of, this rabbi stuff. So that's the term there. Adult men and women, adult men who never went to the school, the religious school, and women were also allowed to sit in on these lessons and learn from the rabbi. They were also known as disciples. They took that rabbi's yoke upon them. They weren't the same kind of disciples as the young men, but they were disciples nonetheless. It's just like Jesus, right? He had 12 disciples, but we know he had a whole lot more that followed him. In at the beginning of Luke 10, we're in Luke 10 now with Mary and Martha, then the Good Samaritans, Luke 10. And Luke 10 opens with Jesus sending out 72 people to go ahead of him to places that he was going to visit to make preparations. These were disciples of Jesus who had taken his yoke upon them outside of the 12, right? Mary and Martha were among these people. They were already sitting at the feet of Jesus at the dinner at their house. It was, a lot more literal here. But Martha was working, doing what she was supposed to do. Yes, she could be a disciple, but it was the old days. She was expected to be in the kitchen getting dinner ready. And on this occasion, while that was happening, the men were listening to Jesus teach. Except Mary ignored tradition and blew off responsibility. There's no way around that. She ignored tradition, she blew off responsibility. Martha was justified in her frustration. So she went to the highest authority in the room. Jesus, tell her to help me. And of course, Jesus knew the culture that he grew up in, right? He knew Martha was right. Yeah, Mary really ought to be in the kitchen helping Martha. Just like the priest and the Levite were right to pass by the dying man on the road to Jericho. But there was a greater right. Martha, you're doing so much, right? You are doing what is right and good, but Mary has chosen the better. Jesus actually once advanced a similar principle to Judas Iscariot, of all people. So, cool thing, John chapter 12 records the same dinner, same episode, okay? John 12 records the same dinner with the same people. Different things happen, but Jesus pretty much gives the same lesson. I'm going to turn there real quick. John chapter 12, the first 8 verses. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given. He gives more detail. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served. That's all it mentioned. It doesn't say Mary served. That's not the story here, but it's interesting that it just says Martha served. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took out a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, a keeper of the money bag. He used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. You'll always have the poor among you. You're not always going to have me. Same dinner, same people, 2 different things happened at that dinner. It would have been right to sell the perfume and give the money to the poor, right? I'm sure they've done that before. Why would he suggest it otherwise? Jesus' response was they're always going to have opportunity to do that, but they were not always going to have him around. Judas, there's value in what you're talking about. You should do stuff like that. But right now, choose what is better. Martha, you're going to prepare so many amazing meals in your life, but I won't be around forever. Well, at least not like I am now, right? There is value in what you're doing. Choose what is better. Choose what is better. That's the challenging part of this passage to me with Mary and Martha, is Mary chose what is better when everything else that was happening was just as acceptable, right? How are we to know the difference? Choose what is better. We're okay with the concept of the lesser of two evils. You know what I'm talking about? Because it's an election year. And so we talk about this every election year, every 4 years. You hear this phrase a lot more. Yeah, I'm just going to choose the lesser of two evils, that kind of thing. It happens a lot. What if the decision was between two really good things? What if, in a perfect world, we had the two best candidates ever, the two best people in the world running, that kind of thing. But no more politics. What if the decision was between two really good things? We have a harder time with the greater or lesser of two rights. Sometimes the decision is more difficult when you can't go wrong either way, right? So which one is best? Jesus didn't have a problem with Martha in the kitchen. He didn't go in there and say, Martha, what do you think you're doing? He didn't do that to her. She wasn't doing anything wrong, anything that needed correction or guidance. If Mary would have offered that perfume in John 12 as a donation for the poor, I'm sure Jesus would have been like, right on, that's awesome, Two right things, one was better. And in both instances, with the perfume and sitting at Jesus' feet, Mary made the better choice. What made it better? She could have joined Martha in the kitchen. She could have kept the jar of perfume and been fine, right? And she would have had, this valuable thing still. She would have been no less holy if she didn't do any of those things. What's the difference? What made her go above and beyond what was unnecessary but beautiful? I'll bet that I'm asking questions and not answering them on purpose, okay? Because I bet that we're confronted with these kinds of choices a lot more than we realize from day to day. Our default is probably to do what makes things a little easier for us, more convenient for us, just like the priest and the Levite did, They had a very good excuse for not being helpful. Well, it's messy, it's going to mess things up, Or maybe just filling a role that we're comfortable with, like Martha did, just doing what she knows to do. I'd say that most people live their lives by rote memorization. We know what to do. We get up in the morning, we go through our morning routine that we can do with our eyes closed. Sometimes I walk out the door and I see myself in the mirror. It's like, oh, did I have my eyes closed? But I'd say maybe most, but at least many Christians live their faith by rote memorization as well. Because we know how to be a Christian. We know what's expected. We know what to do and what not to do because we've memorized the way. And Jesus comes along and says, hey, I want you to think more. He disrupts our tidy, neat little doctrinal frameworks with stories like the Good Samaritan and the dinner at Mary and Martha's house, right? When we're confronted with, these are two amazing things. They were doing what was right, and Jesus is like, think about it. There is a better way. We want to just tell me what to do, and that's what I'll do, but that's not what life is it? Jesus disrupts our thinking, and he says, choose the better way. You, choose it. But you can only know, the better way by knowing him. When you know him, you realize that while I'm supposed to, I really do, I need to work to keep myself pure. I need to do the right thing, right? God would want me, but also realizing that God would want me to help that beaten, bloody man on the side of the road. When you know him, you understand that there are roles that you're expected to play along with, but they can't compare to the beauty at sitting at Jesus' feet. We're not taught how to love our husbands and wives, are we? I mean, hopefully we've had opportunities to observe, but your spouse is different, aren't they? Right? But over time, you begin to understand them. Maybe understand is a strong word on here. I don't know. But you discover why they like what they like, why they do what they do. And it can only happen with intimacy. Living for God is not meant to be the system of doing the right things and not doing the wrong things. The world and the people we know are way too complex for that. There's always that difficult what if situation that pops up to stump us, right? I mean, have you ever been in a conversation with people trying to share Jesus and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, but what about this? Or what if this happens and stuff? And we have our doctrinal frameworks, and it's like, that's not informing me of how to answer this person right now. Because that's not how life is, and that's not how we live this Christian life. The religious leaders knew the Torah inside and out. They lived it every day to the letter of the law, and it was supposed to reveal who God is, his nature and his character, but they couldn't see the forest for the trees. What we see in Mary at the dinner is someone who saw more clearly, someone who could take a step back and take in the beauty of the whole forest. How does that happen? How was she able to make, with the perfume, with sitting at Jesus, all that kind of stuff, how did she know what the better choice is? Because man, I'd really like to know, because I tend to mess it up. I have the hindsight that says, I should have did that, You with me on that? Man, I wish I would have, How does that happen? Time, there's a word we hate sometimes, right? Time, mistakes, grace, victories, defeats, more grace. Man, Paul, just tell me what I'm supposed to do, right? We want answers from a sermon. We want to leave here with more stuff in our tool belt. We want answers from a sermon, not more questions. Well, honestly, one of the newest axioms that really came out of preparing this sermon, the newest life axioms that I have adopted for myself is have more questions than statements. Have more questions than statements. But because living the Christian life is not about getting the list of do's and don'ts on Sundays, then coming back next week to repent of how you didn't do it right, That's simple, but that's also very hard. And that's a lot of people's experience with Christianity. It's also why a whole lot of people leave it, So we learn from Mary today is the Christian life is just not about just following the rules. Am I saying what you do doesn't matter and right and wrong it doesn't matter? No. If you're hearing that, you're not really listening. Because sure, let's do what's right, and the Bible talks about that, right? In a lot of ways. But this isn't math. Living life for God and just in general, with or without God. But for us, living life with God is not math, where 2 + 2 always equals 4. It's new math, right? But it's not math. It's more like a dance, right? More like a dance, not a choreographed routine, mind you. God's not leading some boy band, R&B style, okay? But it's you and him flowing together in the ever-changing rhythm of life. And all these what-if situations. We understand this naturally, that life's crazy sometimes, We want the routines to work, but we just know they don't because we get curveballs all the time. People are messy. We're messy. And you learn, though, to move with him. The Bible says, in him we live and move and have our being. Let's not make the same mistake with the new covenant that the Jewish leaders made with the old. All right? We're going to end today's message with communion. The symbols that we will partake of today, the bread and the wine, well, juice, but they tell us that the way to God is open. Not through the do's and don'ts, not through following the rules, but through relationship. That's what it is. It's relationship. You know, Paul in, I believe it's Philippians 3. You can read it. You can turn there. Check me. I think it's 3. He said, you know, I was born into this thing, and I had everything going for me. I knew what to do to be the Jew of all Jews, you know? But yet he says, whatever was to my credit, all the stuff I enjoyed and knew how to do, all that stuff is loss. What's he pursuing now? Knowing God. Knowing God. See, that's what it's about. We want to live a Christian life sometimes by just, you know, there's the do's and the don'ts. There's the right things and the wrong things, you know. Morgan Wallen has that song about the Bible by the Morgan, tell me the lyrics here, right? You know, he says the book, the one that says don't cuss and don't fight, you know. Actually, it doesn't say that at all. But anyways, but he in the song it talks about, you know, and that's a mindset though that people have it's a rule book. I was in chemistry class my senior year of high school, and my chemistry teacher was going through the rules of the classroom. And in chemistry class, there's things that can hurt you in that room, right? And she's like, this over here, don't touch it, right? You know, don't touch this, don't do this. And she's over here, don't mess with that, stuff like that. And she's like, man, I feel like a preacher. Don't do this, don't do that. We chuckle, but it's sad, isn't it? Because that doesn't fit with life. Isn't it cool, though, that God's not just somewhere up there wondering if we walk the line or not. He's jumping into this mix, this craziness of life that ebbs and flows and changes constantly and always evolving and changing, and he's moving with us. He's leading us in this movement. Pretty cool, huh? You know, I'm an open eyes praying sort of guy, but would you just close your eyes with me for a moment? I hope the point is good today. I understand it's not a tool in your tool belt kind of a point. Hey, take this with you and start doing this now. It's not what it is, but maybe it is to some degree. God, I want to know you. I want to get to know you more. That's the Christian life. Because you're going to get thrown curveballs. You know this because they happen all the time. Life's not going to make sense from time to time. And our neat packaged little rule book is awesome. But sometimes it doesn't address what you're facing. But when you know the heart of God, you know who he is. He leads, you follow. He sees you through. We come to God for so many things. A lot of times it's our prayers are for blessing, for success, a lot for forgiveness, a lot for help. But pray this with me right now. God, would you reveal yourself to me? Because I want to know you from my heart. So many questions, but maybe it's better to have more questions than statements. But when I can have questions when I know your heart though, and I know you, Lord, I trust that you'll lead me through those. To choose what is better. I want to learn your ways so I can move with you. Knowing how to choose what is better, honestly, can start with our own attitude. Can't it? We can bring it down to everyday brass tacks right now. Knowing how to choose what is better can start with our own attitude. You say, hey, yeah, can't blame me for having this kind of attitude right now. No, that's true, but is there something better? We can practice this with our wives, our husbands, our kids, to choose what is better in that relationship. I think we have these kinds of choices more than we realize. God, I want to know you and move with you so I can choose what is better. Let's just pause and ask him for that right now. Let's leave here not with just having been presented with Jesus, but having communed with the living God. Let's just take a moment. God, I want to know you. Maybe you're faced with a situation right now and you don't know which way to go. When we know him, he leads the dance. And because we know him so well, we know the step we're to take to follow him. Can't learn that in a classroom. You can only learn that by just being with him, spending that time, devoting your life, asking for that closeness. Sometimes people feel such an emptiness in their religion, in their faith. I think it's because we come to a point where we realize the rules the rules aren't enough. And you're absolutely right. God, I want to know you. So fill us, Lord. Fill us with you. Fill us with your Spirit, Jesus. Fill us with your presence, your guidance. Lord, I give control of this dance to you. I will follow you, and I want to know you to the degree that when life throws a curveball and you make a move around that, God, I know the next step because I know you. Because we've been doing this long enough. And if you're new to the faith, man, what an amazing adventure. When we step on his toes as he leads the dance, he just laughs and he keeps dancing with us. Because we make mistakes, he gives us grace, and we move on. I thank you, Lord, that this new covenant in your blood and your body that we're celebrating today through communion, it opens the door to really know you.